Fallout Equestria Survivors Guild, Chapter 2, Metropolis. Without heroes, we are all plain people, and don't know how far we can go. Bernard Melamond. So what, you're a stable dweller or something like that? The head of the caravan aluminum can, an earth pony mare, asked as she looked at me curiously. We were on the front of the wagon and talking while I kept a careful lookout. Yeah, something like that, I said as the caravan moved along the old roads towards Manhattan. It was a plausible enough explanation for me, I guess. I'm just trying to see more of Equestria, you know? Yeah, I know what you mean. I grew up in Seattle, but I always wanted to see more of the world, Aluminum said with a smile. So when the Queen's Gambit Caravan Company started to expand, well, I couldn't really resist. Seattle, huh? I asked curiously. I hadn't been to Seattle much outside of the constructions of stables like 9 and 14. What was that like? Not too bad after the Great Schism ended, Aluminum said, which got a look of confusion from me. It's what they call the conflict between the Steel Rangers and the Applejacks Rangers about 9 years ago. Seattle was their battlefield and a lot of ponies got caught up into it. Wait, so what happened? I asked. I remembered the Steel Rangers from the war, but I had no idea what you meant by Applejacks Rangers. A former Steel Ranger named Nova. She helped stop the Steel Rangers and their elder, Aluminum said. She's a nice pony. We crossed paths a few times when I was running caravans with my dad. I listened to her talk a little bit more. I had to wonder how many stories there were in the wasteland. I mean, I knew about Little Pip. I'd gotten the rest of her book while I was in Junction Town. Sure, but there could be a lot more stories out there. I thought back to what I'd heard about the successful stables. One of them was Stable 26. That actually gave me a lot of relief. Looking back, I'd gambled on Stable 26 by having the dwellers build their own society. I was lucky, I guess, that it had survived. But I wondered if I get to meet the pony who left it someday. If I could even figure out what to do with my life at this point. I was in Equestria, but it was also unfamiliar for me. And we went on in silence. I took up the book I was reading from the wagon, and it came all to a stop. I glanced out, but we weren't anywhere near Manhattan from what I could see. What's going on? I asked Aluminum, who started to move the wagon towards the side of the road. There's something going on up ahead, Aluminum said, and gave me a pair of binoculars. Looks like another caravan was attacked. I raised the binoculars to my eyes and saw what she was talking about. There was a wagon that turned over on its side and dead bodies lying around it. I narrowed my eyes when I saw something familiar. Ponies dressed in black, insect-like power armor. It's the Enclave, I said, which made Aluminum's eyes go wide. They must have attacked them on the road. What are they doing here? The Enclave hasn't been this close to Manhattan in years, Aluminum whispered back. At least none of the generals that have shown up, at least. I frowned a little. Calamity had mentioned something about the 7 Wonderbolt generals. One of them had been killed 8 years prior during an attempt to take over the Crystal Wasteland, and another was seen around Minneapolis, but that was left 5 unaccounted for. Could these soldiers answer to one of the other generals, or was there something else going on here? My eyes suddenly went wide when I saw something I didn't expect, and moving into view, dressed in heavily modified power armor, was a towering pony with armored wings and a horn. It was an alicorn. There was an alicorn with the Enclave. What the Tartarus was going on here? The alicorn's head suddenly snapped, and it felt like, despite the helmet, she was looking right at me. I lowered my binoculars and shuddered, and after a few minutes the Enclave soldiers took off in some sort of airship. Let's check this out, Aluminum said, and eased the wagon forward as she was really unsure that the soldiers were far enough away. I didn't say anything as we approached the destroyed caravan. The ponies were lying dead around the destroyed wagon. We climbed off our own wagon and started checking it. The Enclave had picked it clean. Check the cargo manifest. It should be in the strong box and wouldn't really have any value to them, Aluminum said as I opened up the strong box. Inside was a piece of paper with a list of names and words. The caravan had been hauling food and medical supplies from Manhattan to a settlement called Gildacross. I frowned a little at something. I double-checked the number of bodies. We're missing 2, I said, which made Aluminum look up. There's 2 more names on the manifest that we have bodies. Weird. Let me see that, the Earth Pony said and took the manifest, reading it over. Yeah, you're right. I know this caravan. A bunch of good ponies. It looks like we're missing a passenger named Caramel Corn and the caravan's owner's dog, Schooner. What do we do with their bodies? I asked as we started packing up the wagon. There's not much we can really do here. I'll send the word to the company that they worked for, Aluminum said as she climbed onto the front of the wagon. I took one last look around and was surprised to see a dog had arrived on the scene and was whimpering at the corpse of one of the ponies, nudging it gently. This must be the dog that had accompanied the caravan, Schooner. I finished securing my gear and trotted over to the dog, who growled at me and snapped at my hoof when I tried to reach for him. Okay, I'll leave you alone. I said with a sigh, rummaging around in my bags, and took some of the food I had brought with me and set it out. Here, it's for you when you get hungry. The dog just looked at me before I went to the wagon and climbed on, and we started up going to Manhattan again. After traveling a couple more days and through parts of the ruins of Manhattan, I was surprised to find myself looking at the familiar site of a Ministry of Arcane Science hub. Welcome to Tenpony Tower, the shining jewel of the Manhattan ruins, Aluminum said as we pulled in for a stop in the front of the main door, and are greeted by ponies dressed in uniforms. Thanks for the company, Wanderer. You're welcome, I said with a smile. I hope to see you around. You too, Aluminum said and waved as I entered the tower. It wasn't like anything I had seen in the wasteland. It had clearly been populated for a long time. There were ponies moving in and out of the rooms that made up for the shops and other places around the tower. It didn't take me long to find the local office of the Followers of the Apocalypse, and I was greeted by a unicorn mare who gave me a smile. Can I help you, miss? She asked, and looked at me over curiously. Yes. Velvet Remedy told me that there's a pony in here named Focus who might be able to help me out, I said as I looked curiously in. Is he in? Oh, sorry, miss. Focus had to travel to one of the settlements in the city. He won't be back for a few days, the receptionist said regretfully. I could send word to him if it's important, though. No, it's fine. I can wait if I have to, I said with a shake of my head. I didn't want to impose. I'll just find a place to stay in the tower, I guess. Of course. Sorry for the inconvenience, the receptionist said with a smile, and she made a note. I'm sure that Focus will be happy to meet with you as soon as he gets back. I nodded and trotted out of the office and started looking around the area. I was constantly amazed at how ponies had managed to rebuild after the mega spells, and I had to wonder how much of that really was from the stables, and how much of it was just good old pony ingenuity. Did it really matter, though? We had survived as a species, and from what I had seen, so did many others. That was ultimately our goal with Stable Tech, and I was happy to know that we actually succeeded. That didn't change the fact that I had left it to burn, though. I sighed and stopped by a restaurant. I got some food that was a little more than pre-war food, and had been scavenged and repurposed. I sat down on one of the tables and started to eat. Excuse me? The mare's voice said, and I looked up surprised to see a blue-gray unicorn mare with an orange mane and tail glaring at me. And she was wearing a stable jumpsuit, from Stable 66. Uh-oh. You're Scootaloo, aren't you? Maybe. Who's asking? I said with a gulp. I didn't really like where this was going. How did she know who I was? The unicorn didn't reply, but instead she swung her hoof at me, catching me off guard as it connected to my muzzle, sending my hat flying. I didn't even have time to think about what I was doing, and I hit her back as hard as I could. Before even realizing what was happening, we were being pulled away from each other by ponies dressed in security barding. Let me go! It's all her fault! Everything that happened to Stable 66 is her fault! The mare screamed at me and the security ponies. It's all her fault! I just stood there in stunned silence. I knew that it was going to be inevitable that I encountered ponies that felt like this, but it hit me harder than I thought it was going to. As security took us away, the stable mare just kept glaring at me. The hatred in her eyes were clear. Dear Celestia, what have I done? I stared up at the ceiling of the holding cell that they had put me in inside. Stable 66 has been one of the stables we had constructed here in Manhattan. It had been populated with a societal elite of this part of Equestria. The rich and the famous, ponies who had been accustomed to comfortable living. And maybe it wasn't one of our better ideas, but we had built it to be so small so families would have to double up. Stable 66 has been similar in principle to what I did with Stable 1, to deal with ponies that had fueled for the war. I didn't sabotage it, but the stable had been built to force them into coming to grips with their new reality. I guess it lasted this long, but what happened there? I wound up being in the holding cell for a few days. It wasn't too bad, but it got lonely, and really more than anything else, it left me alone with my thoughts. Equestria was different from what I remembered, but I was trying to get used to it. You're free to go, a voice said, and I was surprised to see the guard opening the cell door. You can pick up your personal effects at the security office on your way out. Wait, why am I being freed? I asked with a blink as I got up and headed to the door. You got bailed out by a friend. She's waiting for you outside, the guard said. I blinked a little at that. I didn't have any friends in Tenpony Tower, except maybe Aluminum. I walked out of the cell and past the unicorn stable dweller who glared at me as I trotted past. I tried not to think of her as I headed for the front door of the security office. I stopped by the desk at the front and picked up my saddlebags and my hat. I trotted out of the security office and was greeted by a gray unicorn mare with a spiky blue mane with a cloak covering most of her body. Hey there, Wanderer, she said with a smile, and she offered me a hoof. I'm Homage. I heard about you coming here from Calamity, and well, I had to see for myself. It's nice to meet you, Homage, I said with a weak smile as I shook her hoof. It was strange, actually. She kind of reminded me of Vinyl Scratch, only gray. Thanks for helping me back out there. They would have let you out eventually anyway once things were working out with the NCR, Homage said with a shrug as we started walking together. The fighting charge was minor, and they should have let you go the next day. So they were holding me because of who I am? I said with a sigh. That's one thing you don't have to worry about legally, at least in any areas affiliated with the NCR, Homage said. Legally, you and any other survivors can't be held accountable for any of your crimes during the war, including the stables. It's considered time served if you're still alive, I guess. It actually did make me feel a little better. At least I wasn't able to spend the rest of my life in prison because of the stables. I just had to deal with my own conscience for the rest of my life. There was something else that was bugging me, though. What do you know about the mayor who attacked me? I asked. Oh, you mean Arclight? Homage asked as I nodded. Not a whole lot. I asked around about her, and she showed up about a day before you did, and she said she was from a stable when any pony asked. I sighed and tried not to think about what to do next. So, where are we going now? There's some pony who would like to meet you, Homage said with a smile. I blinked a little at that, but just followed her. We left the public areas of Tenpony Tower, and I found myself in a more private area. It was pretty much empty as we passed by a fountain and finally stopped with a room with a light that said on air over the door. A radio station? I asked Homage curiously. Yep, DJ Pone 3. She's been on the air ever since the mega spells fell, Homage said. I blinked a little at that. DJ Pone 3 was Vinyl Scratch's stage name. I knew for a fact that she had been in Stable 29, but did somebody else take up the name and become like a ghoul or something? Homage actually chuckled a little when she saw the look of confusion on my face before she turned serious. Scootaloo, I'm gonna trust you with one of the biggest secrets in Equestria. Do you promise not to tell any pony? I promise, I said, and tilted my head a little. I had to wonder what kind of secret was so important that I had to be sworn into secrecy. Homage smiled and nodded, and a few minutes later the light went off and she told me to wait outside of her before she went through the door. There had been a DJ Pone 3 ever since after Vinyl made it into Stable 29. That was actually kind of a shame. We had been considering moving Vinyl and Octavia into Stable 27 in the south, but it hadn't gone through yet, so they just wound up in 29 when the bombs fell. From what I had read in the Book of Little Pip, it may have been better if we had all made it work after all. Scootaloo, you can come in, Homage said as she opened the door again. Just remember that you have to keep everything you see in here secret. I nodded and Homage let me in. I found myself inside the radio station's broadcast center, which had an elaborately designed computer in it. I blinked in surprise when I saw a zebra mare with her mane tied into a braid who looked and dressed in a cloak similar to the one that Homage wore. Hello, Scootaloo, the zebra said with a smile. I wasn't really sure what to make of this as she offered a hoof. My name is Ziira. I'm DJ Pone 3. Wait, DJ Pone 3's a zebra? I asked confused. That was certainly not really what I expected at all. Oh, I'm just the most recent, Ziira said with a smile. It's been passed down from pony to pony ever since Vinyl Scratch's nephew took the title. Well, that does explain a lot, I said and smiled a little. It's an honor to meet you, Ziira. Likewise, Scootaloo, Ziira said as we shook hooves. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? I just want to get to know you a little bit more. Maybe, if we have to, I can help you with the Wastelanders that don't quite understand what happened with you. Okay, I guess it couldn't hurt, I said and paused a moment. Just one thing, that mare Arclight, can you get her released? That's a strange request, but I'll see what I can do, Ziira said with a nod before gesturing for me to take a seat as she took out a recording device. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I said, and Homage gave me a reassuring smile as Ziira activated the device. Okay, Scootaloo, this is to give you a chance to tell your side of the story, Ziira said as she gave me a nod. Now, because of the Book of Little Pip and Ruby Starlight's account on the war with the Empire, a lot of ponies have heard parts of your story. I think we'd like to hear it from you, though. What happened that led up to the creation of the stables? I took a deep breath and started to talk. Well, during the war, Applebloom, Sweetie Belle, and myself started Stable Tech to help create new technology for Equestria. Not for the war effort, but to help ponies in their day-to-day lives. When it became obvious that the mega spells were going to be a danger to Equestria, we started developing the stables themselves. They were constructed for the purpose of preserving lives. Ponies, zebras, griffins, changelings, deer, buffalo, really any species that we could give a chance to survive. But I paused a little from what I had to say next, but it was going to be hard to admit. especially if this was going to be broadcast all over Equestria. What I was going to have to say wouldn't be easy to hear, but it was the truth. Are you okay, Scootaloo? We can stop if you want, Ziara said. I'm fine, I said with a shake of my head. The stable experiments were included as an effort to help learn from the mistakes of the past. That being said, we made a lot of mistakes. The experiments hurt ponies either directly or indirectly, and for that, I'm sorry. In our efforts to try and help Equestria, we wound up doing a lot more harm. I can't change my actions, but I promise every pony listening to this that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for my actions, and that of my company. Thank you, Scootaloo. I'm sure you'll do fine, Ziara said reassuringly with a smile. I had to admit that it actually did help a lot to say that out loud. I had no idea if any pony would actually ever hear this interview, but just getting it off my chest actually helped a little. Ziara asked me a few more questions about the war before she started asking about my foalhood. That surprised me a little bit, but I answered them to the best of my ability. I was surprised to learn that she knew about me being raised in an orphanage, but I guess that had been learned from one of the books she had mentioned. Well, that was very good. Thank you, Scootaloo, Ziara said as she shut off the recording finally. How do you feel? Homage asked as she looked at me. Honestly, a little better. I just have to hope that ponies will listen, I said with a sigh, and the two mares nodded in agreement. Still, I had a long ways to go before I finally made up for my actions, but, well, at least I was trying.